As you surely know, the pandemic is a very pressing issue, but today we will take a step back and consider a perhaps bigger issue, one that almost certainly has affected problems including the pandemic. This issue is human-induced climate change. Now, the connection between the two might not seem so clear yet, but hopefully by the end of this video, you'll understand how they're so innately related. We'll also discuss how the health of the environment, the health of animals, and the health of humans are all interconnected. To begin, I will give an example and share a story about a fictional person named John. Now, John lives near the edge of a sparingly wooded area, but his house is getting old and he wants to build a new one. So he decides to go to a local hardware store to buy a chainsaw and begin his project. He cuts down a few trees for the foundation of his house. He gets the rest of the necessary supplies to finish, and voila, he has a new house. John is tired and now wants to take a rest by sitting on the rocking chair on his new porch. But he notices something strange. There are a lot more mosquitoes and other insects. By the time John gets inside, he has more bug bites than he can count. What's the reason for this? Well, the area that John built his house in had a good ratio of birds that eat the insects to keep both populations in check. The birds lived in the trees and the insects lived on the ground and grass. And John may not have realized it, but by building his new house, he was making the very area a very uncomfortable place for the birds to live, because they had no house. So he took the houses of the birds and threw off the balance of birds to insects, and the insect population began to grow out of control. So what can we learn from this? Well, I think that a good lesson would be that we must consider all the possible effects of our decisions before we make them. There are many ripple effects that can happen from very simple decisions. The environment and its climate are not immune to our actions, and we are not immune to its reactions to the way that we treat it. A popular way of thinking of this is the idea of One Health. To think of One Health, picture a triangle with each side labeled human health, animal health, and environmental health. You need all three sides for the triangle to stand, because a triangle can't stand with just two sides. That's like the world that we live in. Human health is important, but it depends on both environmental health and animal health, and so do the other three. So let's pull this all back to right here and right now. We are about a year into this pandemic, and the actions that caused it are still at play. The habitats of many animals are being destroyed every single day, forcing them to find new places to survive, and often these animals have no experience with humans, and they have immunity to diseases that humans do not, and vice versa. So when humans move into an area that used to be a rainforest, they will be subjected to the animal life there that remains, and this is actually one of the ways that HIV/AIDS pandemic started, which is still going on, by the way. And it's also how the current pandemic started.
Most likely.
Human habitat is expanding into the habitats of other species that would otherwise never come into contact with humans. When the Pilgrims came to what is now called America, they spread disease to the native people because while the Europeans had immunity to common cold diseases, the native people that lived here did not. Now imagine if humans were to move into a new area and the scenario was flipped around, where the native species were immune to certain diseases that humans are not, like a bat, which is actually a reservoir for many different types of coronaviruses. And suppose that humans come into the same area that bats lived, and then the bats were to transfer the coronavirus to humans. This is how a pandemic starts, and it is preventable. Humans are also influencing another natural process, evolution. Evolution is typically a slow process, and also a random process, in which some random minute changes to an organism makes it so slightly more adapted to its environment. Usually, the environment decides what is best, because if the organism survives longer and reproduces, its tiny genetic variation will likely also survive longer and reproduce. Now, when humans come in and change the environment, like say when humans just started the Industrial Revolution and were producing lots of things, and many of these things required a furnace or some type of heating, and this heating apparatus creates ash as a byproduct of the production of these things, then in things like what happened in the early 1800s in England with the peppered moth, where its wings, originally white to camouflage with the trees, were selected for the black variation because the trees were covered in ash by the end of the mid-1800s. Now, of course, some moths were already black by a random variation of their genes, and in this case, those darker colored moths survived because they were all of a sudden adapted to the environment that they lived in. But this environment was changed because of the humans. So the humans changed the environment, which changed the animals. You can see here how all three are naturally interrelated. This is one example out of many in which humans have affected the animals around them because we changed the environment to fit our needs. Again, this is how pandemics happen, but this is also how much worse things can happen, like mass extinctions of species. Every day, about 150 species go extinct. That's about 10% of all species on Earth every single year, which means that in the average human lifespan, 99.98% of species on Earth will go extinct. The idea of One Health is a very helpful tool for thinking about how we humans affect everything on Earth, including ourselves. Now, while John might not be a real person, there are plenty of very similar situations that occur every day. Taking a few extra seconds to see if that yogurt container is recyclable or bringing a reusable bag to the grocery store instead of taking a one-time use plastic bag are all good ways to help. The best ways to help, though, are including the ideas that I'm sharing with more people, so that more people can also be aware of the impact that they have on the world, and not only the health of the world, but their community and even themselves. Thank you for listening. Remember to wear a mask.